This Sunday we are about to celebrate the Feast of Pentecost. And for most of us, we are very familiar with all the traditions and customs that are around this holiday. As disciples of Jesus, we always endeavor to become better followers of the Messiah. And we at Shoresh, we like to delve deep into the Hebrew Scriptures and put the Bible in its Jewish context, learning more about what Jesus read and how he taught the Hebrew Scriptures. And as a clear example of this would be the Feast of Pentecost. For most Christians, Pentecost is the giving of the Holy Spirit and the birth of the church. But there's more. And I would like to take the opportunity to show you another side of Pentecost that perhaps you haven't heard of before. Pentecost, called Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks in Hebrew, first appears in the books of Exodus and Leviticus, occurring 50 days after the Passover, the Exodus from Egypt. Passover and Pentecost initially are agrarian-based holidays. That is, agrarianism are cultures that are centered around economically with the cultivation of the land. And so their worship often revolved around a harvest time. For Passover, that was barley, and for Pentecost, it's the wheat harvest in the land of Israel. The rabbis noticed that it took 50 days to get from the Exodus of Egypt to Mount Sinai. And what happened at Mount Sinai? The first time that God actually appeared to his people. He spoke to them. What did he speak? He gave his Torah, his teaching and his instructions to the children of Israel. So theologically, we begin to have a switch. Theologically, Shavuot, Pentecost, becomes the festival of the giving of the Torah. A close look at the text in Exodus 20 raises some very interesting questions. Most translations say of Exodus 20:18 that the people witnessed thunder and lightning as God spoke. But the Hebrew is a little more clearer than that. We have a look at the text in Shmot, Exodus 20:18. We read that Kol ha'am ro'im et hakolot ve'et halepedim ve'et kol hashofar. Literally, all the people saw voices, they saw fire, and they saw the voice of the shofar. Now this begs the question, how can you see voices? How can you see fires? And how can you see the voice of the shofar? In Jewish tradition, when God speaks, fire came out of his mouth. And those fires were also his voice. And there were multiple versions. As God spoke, it split into multiple fires. This explains why the people saw both fire and voice. King David records in 2 Samuel chapter 22, verse 9, that when God speaks, fire does indeed come out of his mouth. Jewish tradition records that as God spoke to the people of Israel, the fire came out of his mouth, split into 70 fires, each fire with a unique voice. Why 70? Where does that number come from? Actually, it comes from Genesis chapter 10, where we see the nations of the world. All the nations of the world are listed as 70 peoples, each one with a distinctive language. So in Jewish tradition, the giving of the Torah is something that occurs to all the world. It is something that involves fire, it involves multiple languages, and it involves God giving something to the people of the world. All of this becomes very theologically important with God's actions at the Feast of Shavuot. So what has all this got to do with Pentecost? Well, let me tell you. In Acts chapter 2, we read that the disciples were all together in one place. Now, most likely, that was actually the temple area. We also read in Acts chapter 2, verse 5, that there were Jews in Jerusalem from every nation under heaven. God had brought the world once again to his holy mountain. All of a sudden, we read that there is wind filling the temple, and miraculously, we see visible fire appear on the disciples. And they begin to speak in multiple languages, one language for each people group that is represented. God is once again speaking to all the world. So what are all the connections between fire and voices, the giving of the Holy Spirit, and God speaking to the world? Passover and Pentecost, Shavuot, are festivals of redemption. God redeems his people from Egypt, and he brings them to Mount Sinai to reveal himself and become part of the people. He asks them to build a tabernacle so he can live with them. This is very special. And how does he do it? He doesn't just speak. There's something visible. It's fire. It's not just a party trick or some sort of piece of magic. It has a deeper meaning than that. Fire, by the time of the New Testament, meant something. It meant God's presence. It meant God's redemption. It meant God's voice. And it now means the Holy Spirit. And so as we gather at Pentecost, and we think fire, and we think languages, then think a little deeper. Know that it's a lot more. These fires, the way God speaks to the world, is about his love and his redemption. For God so loved the world, says the Gospel of John.